Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation I received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if any questions related to your nutritional plan, your workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, I've been trying to gain weight, but have been stuck at the same body weight for 3 weeks. Should I increase my calories or add one more workout to train? I currently train 4 days a week with weights. Okay. It's a good question because here's the thing. You obviously, if your goal is to gain muscle, I'm assuming you want to gain muscle, you don't just want to gain weight. You have to make sure that you're fueling your body properly so that you can perform more efficiently in the gym. In order to do that, a lot of people will tell you, oh, you need to increase your protein. I disagree with that. Protein should, yes, should be high if your goal is to build muscle, but it doesn't need to be astronomically high. What you should be focusing on more are your complex carbohydrates. And there's a lot of people out there will say, well, if I have too much carbs, I'm going to get fat. Also true. Here's the thing though. If you are someone who's in the gym 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and you're training intensely, as long as you're fueling your body with the right carbs, as in complex carbohydrates, your quinoa, your brown rice, your white rice, oatmeal, cream of rice, those carbs are going to be utilized to your benefit because they're going to allow you to lift heavier weights. They're going to allow you to move more quickly in the gym. So you're not resting as long between sets. If you can lift heavier weights, better form, better technique, and pump as much glycogen and blood into the muscle bellies for volume training, you're going to grow muscle. Okay. So here's the question though. Well, how much carbs do I add in? So, like I said, there is a fine line. So, you also have to understand your body type. If you are someone who is an endomorph who puts on weight very easily, which doesn't sound like you are, then you have to be careful as to how much carbs you add on because if you bring in too many carbs, you're going to gain body fat, right? So, you have to make sure you back off and slowly increase them and just monitor your physique accordingly. But you, to me, sound like you're someone who's more of an ectomorph, someone who has a hard time gaining weight. And I can relate to that because I'm the exact same body type. So, if you rewind to my contest that I did 2 months ago, I slowly started to increase my not just my calories, but my complex carbs and my healthy fats, I should say, post contest. My protein pretty much stayed the same. I was doing about 230 grams of protein a day. I'm still doing that right now. There was no reason for me to increase my protein. However, because I was going to take advantage of what we call the anabolic window post contest, I wanted to fuel my workouts so I could lift heavier weights. I could train more frequently. I could rest less. And honestly, my muscle mass was increased just by slowly bumping up my complex carbohydrates. All right. So my recommendation is you want to focus more on your carbs. Now, I'm not doing your diet, so I don't know what your carb intake is, but my recommendation to you would be to bump them up gradually and watch how that affects your workouts. If you're not getting stronger in the gym, bump them up more. If you're like, Nick, I can't eat more. I have clients like that who I have them on like mass gaining plans, like, I cannot eat more. I'm like, okay, no problem. Let's increase your healthy fats because healthy fats, they're easier to put in because they're more calorically dense, right? So 9 calories per gram, for example. Very easy to get in. You can throw an extra tablespoon of peanut butter into your shake. That's pretty easy to digest, right? So I'll start doing that with people who are hard gainers. Whatever I can do though to help them perform better in the gym. And I'll usually increase their calories, if you will, around their workout. So let's say you're someone who works out first thing in the morning. I'm going to have you do a high carb breakfast before you train, and I'm going to have you do a high carb post workout meal. So your two highest carb meals will be surrounding your workout. That's going to help you perform better in the gym. It's also going to help you recover better. All right. And then again, if it's someone still not gaining weight, then what I'll typically do with that person is like I said, I'll increase their fats. Rarely will I increase their protein because most people who work with me, their protein levels are already pretty high. And if you follow me on the Q&A or my YouTube shorts or the Instagram reels, you know that I'm not a huge advocate of going ridiculously high on protein. As I said earlier, putting your protein levels astronomically makes zero sense because you're going to put a lot of stress on your kidneys. You don't need to do that. Okay. So I think there's a huge misconception as to how much protein the human body really needs. And especially if you are someone who is an athlete, you're in the gym regularly, you don't need to consume ridiculous amounts. Right. I always tell people if you can, you're looking at about 1.5 grams times pound of body weight. All right. So that gives you a good indicator as to where you should be. Like I said, I'm around 230. I go a little bit lower because I don't feel I need that much protein. All right. But if you are someone who truly is a really hard gainer, you might need to increase that. But overall, my recommendation is to slowly increase your macronutrients, preferably your complex carbs and your healthy fats, and then your protein. Again, I don't work with you, so I'd have to look at your diet. But if you're noticing that the weight has plateaued, my first recommendation would be to increase your complex carbs. Okay. And then monitor your body. If you notice you're putting on body fat, scale them back a little bit, maybe increase your protein then, but just keep an eye on your physique. You're not just going to wake up and be fat overnight. That's not going to happen. All right. I promise you. You can monitor your physique on a daily to weekly basis, take weekly photos so you can compare them, how you're looking. Watch the scale once a week, get on the scale, make sure you know you're not putting on like 5 pounds of weight every week. That's not good, right? So you want to make sure that you're doing a gradual increase, just like you're trying to lose weight, a gradual decrease. Not to me, that's my recommendation. Okay, if your goal is to put on weight, good quality weight, as in muscle, not just any type of weight. Increase your complex carbs first, increase your healthy fats second, and as a last resort, look at your protein. All right. Question number two. Nick, why do my arms get stronger but barely seem to get any bigger? Because stronger doesn't necessarily equate to larger muscles. And I've talked about this in the past. So I've used the comparison when you're looking at a powerlifter. Powerlifters are very strong. Hell, they're stronger than most bodybuilders. But aesthetically, they don't look strong. They don't look powerful. They don't look like a gladiator, if you will, if you're a bodybuilder, right? They don't have that V taper, that small little waist, bulging biceps. They're big, right? They have muscle, but it's not defined. It's not refined. It's not solid, lean, dense muscle. It's strong muscle, but there's this difference between what we call aesthetically pleasing muscle versus just strong muscle. All right. You can have functional muscle. You can have strong muscle, or you can have what we call aesthetically pleasing muscle. And if you're someone who trains like a bodybuilder who's trying to sculpt your physique, you are training for an aesthetically pleasing muscle appearance, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of times, especially in this climate, a lot of people shame you for wanting to look a certain way. And I'm like, who doesn't want to look good? Right? It's okay to want to look good. You shouldn't feel bad because you want to look good. So that's what I always tell clients. I'm like, if vanity gets you into the gym, that's great. You have to have another why as to what's going to keep you in the gym. But, having a little bit of vanity, in my opinion, is good. It's not a bad thing. So just because you can lift the heaviest weights does not necessarily equate that you're going to have the most aesthetically pleasing muscles. Not going to happen. So for myself, like I don't have massive arms, but I have vascular arms. I have definition. You can see my short head of my humerus. You can see the long head. So my muscle bellies are defined, but I don't lift super heavy weights. I curl 35-pound dumbbells. That's it. I know guys that curl 60-pound dumbbells, but their arms are like 14 inches, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that because you're stronger, you're going to have bigger muscles. Okay, that's a huge mistake. If you really want to define, refine, and make that have that solid, dense, lean muscle appearance, you want to stick with that, in my opinion, that 10 to 15 rep range. Occasionally you can drop them down to 8, especially if you're doing drop sets, but I try to stay in double digits. I find that works best for most people. Okay, yeah, there's a few genetic freaks out there that can respond really well to doing like 6 reps, and some people that do 20, 25 reps. But for the general population, I find man or woman respond best to that 10 to 15 rep range if they're trying to build an aesthetically pleasing physique. If you are trying to just build stronger muscles, by all means, you can keep your reps in single digits like powerlifters do because they will get stronger. All right. And I've always said I'm not a strong lifter. I'm really not. I squat 315. That's not crazy amounts of weight, especially for how long I've been training. I bench press 225. That's it. And the thing is, though, I've been able to get fairly decent results doing that. I've remained injury free over the years. All right. So you have to get rid of that. I have to keep lifting heavier weights. Yes, lifting heavier weights with good form and technique will help you build muscle, but lifting heavier weights in that that rep scheme I said, that rep range of 10 to 15 will get you better results. So don't just go into the gym and just try to lift heavy weights. Try to maintain good form, practice proper technique, and stay in that 10 to 15 rep range. That's going to allow you to build that solid, lean, dense muscle. So you might not be curling 60-pound dumbbells because you might not be able to do 60-pound dumbbells for 10 to 15. I know I can't, but I can do 35 for 10 to 15, and my arms feel like they get a good pump, and I've been able to build decent results from doing that. All right. So that's my recommendation to you. Forget about how strong you are and focus on stimulating, not annihilating the muscle bellies. All right. Remember, if you're trying to sculpt a physique, you have to approach your workouts like an artist. You're trying to go in there and sculpt, refine your physique. You're not just trying to throw heavy weights around. All right. Nick, do I really need a post-workout shake immediately after training, or is that overblown? Yeah, I've spoken about post-workout shakes numerous times on Q&A. I've written posts about them. I'm not a firm believer in post-workout shakes. I never have been. The whole ideology behind the post-workout shake is that protein will be delivered to your muscles in a faster manner through liquid form. Not true. I've never seen any concrete evidence to suggest this. This was more bro science brought to you by the supplement companies who are trying to sell you their protein powders. So I'm not saying don't have protein powder, but don't kid yourself and think you need to have a post-workout shake. I haven't had a post-workout shake in 20 years. Don't do them. Don't like them. I prefer to eat my food. That doesn't mean that I don't have protein powder though. I still put protein powder in my morning oatmeal. I still put protein powder in my post-workout meal, but I put it with rice. I know a lot of people think that's gross, but I don't care. It's just fuel for me. I have 2 cups of jasmine rice and 2 scoops of protein powder. If you want to have that protein powder in a shaker cup, by all means, and throw in some waxy maize for the carbohydrates, do it. But I like to eat my food. But to go back to the post-workout shake or the post-workout meal, in my opinion, you do not need to down that meal immediately after your workout. You have a window. All right. So what I compare it to is like driving a car. So if your car's running on empty, you can still get by, right? And if you've done a workout, you're not necessarily on empty. You still have some carbohydrates in your body. You still have whatever you ate before your workout. It's still there. You didn't just break it all down. So you still have some fuel. Your body's not just going to immediately go into a catabolic state because you're not eating or drinking a post-workout shake immediately after your workout. What I try to tell clients is try to at least don't let it go longer than 2, 3 hours post-workout. Get something in, preferably a protein of some sort with a complex carb and a healthy fat. I personally like to just do a protein and a complex carb, but I find a lot of people lack healthy fats in their diet. So depending on the person I'm working with women, I'll typically give them a healthy fat post-workout. Men, I'll kind of stay off the fat post-workout, but maybe a few hours after their post-workout meal, I'll throw in more fats. Okay, so it really depends on who I'm working with, their activity level, their gender, what their goals are. But across the board, I've never believed in putting too much emphasis on the post-workout meal or the post-workout shake. In my opinion, as long as you're getting within 24 hours enough protein, complex carbs, healthy fats throughout the day, you're going to build muscle. You're going to lose fat. You're going to perform better in the gym. So don't worry necessarily about getting that meal in immediately or that shake. There is zero, and I mean zero, concrete evidence to support that claim, right? Again, any evidence you find, it's usually from the bros in the gym, the supplement companies. They're just pumping out bullshit. Okay. So just in my opinion, just try to get some type of food in you within at least 2, 3 hours. For me, when I'm done my workout, I'm usually really hungry. So I usually do have my post-workout meal immediately after my workout, unless I have a meeting or I'm in back-to-back sessions with clients, and then I'll have it 2 or 3 hours after. I'm still hungry, but I'll definitely get that meal in. Okay. But your body's not going to go into a catabolic state because you wait 1 hour after your workout to consume some protein, whether it's in liquid or solid form. Okay. Nick, how much cardio is too much when I'm trying to build muscle in the off season? Yeah, again, I talked about the cardio, and here's the thing. As long as you're eating a sufficient amount of food, you can do 30, 45 minutes of cardio in your off season. You're not going to lose muscle. I think that's a myth when people say, oh, you're going to lose muscle if you do too much cardio. I think that if your goal is, say you're a bodybuilder and you have your off season, I think it's important to still do cardio on a daily basis. I don't think it's necessary to do an hour or 2 hours of cardio because you're not trying to get stage lean. But because you're trying to just stay lean overall, also you want to maintain good heart health. My recommendation is to do at least 20 minutes of cardio a day, whether that's in a fasted state or immediately after your resistance training workout. I find it to be incredibly beneficial. I've kept cardio in year round. Okay. And I find it works really well. I find it helps me with my workouts because I don't rest as long in between sets. One of the reasons I see a lot of people who take really long rest periods between sets is because their cardiovascular endurance sucks. They're breathing heavy. They're almost like hyperventilating. They need to sit down. I'm like, man, your cardio sucks. Your resting heart rate must be 90 plus beats per minute. My resting heart rate right now is 36 beats per minute. Okay, I want to maintain that. I don't want it higher than that because that's to me that's excellent because that means if my resting heart rate's low, my training heart rate, it takes a lot to push it up high, which means I recover very quickly because it drops back down again. Okay, so the slower your heart rate, the better. right? So that's why I believe in keeping cardio in year round. Now, how much is too much? Well, here's the thing. Yeah, if you're doing an hour plus of cardio a day, unless you're not eating enough food, you will lose muscle. But I would argue and say, if that same person is doing an hour of cardio a day, as long as they're getting enough complex carbs, healthy fats, and lean proteins, they should still be able to grow. Okay, so I've never believed that cardio is going to take away from muscle growth unless you're in a severe caloric deficit. In that case, yes, you will burn muscle. So you have to be very careful. All right. But I think it's a big mistake to take it out. Even if you're someone who doesn't compete, you're like, "Ah, I just want to get bigger." I still think it's a mistake if you don't do cardio on a regular basis. And I don't mean you have to be on a treadmill or an elliptical trainer or stationary bike. You can just go outside and walk. For me, I walk to and from my gym. It's about a 20-minute walk there, 20-minute walk back. I'm getting in at least 40 minutes of cardio a day minimum. And I also do some cardio on the treadmill on top of that. And I usually go back and forth to my gym at least 4 times a day. So, I'm getting close to 2 hours of cardio in a day. Okay. And I attribute that to being able to maintain a fairly lean physique. Plus, I get lots of carbs, lots of protein, lots of healthy fats. So I'm fueling my body properly in order to do that cardio in addition to my hour of weight training, or in my case, 45 minutes of weight training. Okay. So you just have to make sure that your diet's in check and that your nutrition's dialed in completely, and you should be able to do cardio every day. So I really don't think you need to stop doing cardio. And in fact, I think it's a mistake to take it out completely. Okay. Okay. Nick, should I train through joint pain or is that a sign I need to change my exercise selection? Yeah, so if you're experiencing joint pain, let's say you're experiencing joint pain in your elbow, for example, right? And you're doing an arm workout. If you're doing, you say you start your workout off with triceps first, you're doing supersets. So you're going to say let's do some close grip bench press with some barbell easy bar curls. Here's the thing. If you're experiencing whether it's tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, or maybe you just have some tendonitis, you're going to want to start with an exercise that's not necessarily a fixed movement. So doing a closed grip bench press, like I just mentioned, in my opinion, would be a mistake because that's a very fixed movement. It's a compound movement. Instead, I would supplement that for, let's say, cable rope extensions. And that's what I typically start most of my clients' arms workout off with. Because I find anything that allows free movement with a cable allows to release a little bit more synovial fluid within those joints. So in this case, it would be the elbow. So I usually find that works well for most people, including myself. If it's the shoulders, it's the same thing. I don't necessarily start someone with a dumbbell shoulder press. If they're experiencing rotator cuff issues, I might start them actually with rear delt raises just to retract the rhomboids and scapula and get the shoulders moving with some weights. Then I'll throw in some presses, whether it's a barbell military press or seated dumbbell shoulder press. So I don't necessarily take out the exercise unless I know for a fact the exercise is causing an issue for somebody, which sometimes it does. Sometimes there's certain exercises that people can't do, right? If someone's experiencing a lot of pain, for example, doing an upright row, I'm not going to force them to do an upright row, but I'm going to provide them with an alternative that's going to allow them to work their trapezius sufficiently. Okay, so it's not necessarily taking out the exercise, but sometimes you have to, but it could just mean changing the sequence of the exercises you're doing them in. If you take legs, for example, I work with a lot of people who suffer from knee pain, right? And a lot of these people, most of them were runners for years. So I attribute all the running on concrete that's caused the knee pain because they weren't lifting weights, their quadriceps and hamstrings weren't strong enough to support the weight that they're running on that concrete for years. And now they have patellofemoral syndrome. They have some really bad pain either in their meniscus or the patella. So, you have to be very careful with how you program for people with knee pain when you're training legs. But what I find works for most people, rather than get them in a squat rack right away, I might get them doing some walking lunges. Okay, because walking lunges, they're just using body weight. They don't have to put any additional weight on. They're not usually putting a bar on their back with 45 aside and squatting down to the ground. They're going to warm up with some body weight lunges. And that will usually help just release synovial fluid in the joints. For me, I don't have knee pain, so I can jump right into the squat rack. I have no problems. Okay, so you have to really listen to your body and understand how the body works and how the exercise that you're selecting works, not just that muscle tendon, but also the surrounding joint. So whether that's your elbow, your rotator cuff, your hip flexors and abductors, or your knees, or your ankles even, you have to make sure that you're programming properly. Okay? So my recommendation is to switch up the exercise sequence first. If that doesn't work, try to pinpoint the exercise where you're feeling the pain the most. Take that out for a few weeks, maybe a few months, and slowly bring it back in over time. All right. Because I don't think, like I said before, not every exercise is for every person, but also I don't think every exercise, I don't think there are any bad exercises. I really don't, because even like I'm not a huge advocate of doing those behind the neck pull downs or behind the neck presses, but they do work for some people. So I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, that's dangerous. Do I think it's dangerous for the average sedentary person who sits at a desk all day? Yes, absolutely. But for an athlete who trains and has great mobility and flexibility, no, they could probably do behind the neck pull downs or behind the neck presses. No problem. All right. I know I can. I just don't find it to be beneficial for me. So I don't do those exercises. So that's another thing too, is find the exercises that work best for your physique. All right. Like I said, not every exercise is for every person. And if you're not sure how to do that, work with a coach that has a knowledgeable set of eyes and experience and can say to you, okay, I think this exercise is working, or let's take it out. And that can be based on the fact that you keep injuring a shoulder, you keep experiencing lower back pain, whatever it may be, or the exercise is just not working for your physique. You're not seeing any benefits after doing it for a year. And you're like, I don't really see any change in my physique. Take it out, put something else in. Right. But that's what I'd recommend. As a final tip, if you are experiencing joint pain, you might want to pick up some glucosamine and in addition, put some topical on that joint. So if it goes back to your elbow, put some Tiger Balm or Voltaren on the area. That should help as well. Not a huge advocate of taking Advil. However, if you're experiencing severe joint pain during certain workouts, you might want to pop one or two Advil pre-workout. I'm not suggesting you do this every day or 2 or 3 times a day. I'm just saying for that one workout. I know a few weeks ago I was having issues with my hips, so I was taking two Advil pre-leg workout. Now I'm not doing that. I did it for about 3 weeks. That was two Advil a week. So six Advils in 3 weeks. All right. And it helped. The ibuprofen really helped reduce the inflammation. My hip now feels better and I'm back to normal again. Okay. So listen to your body. Again, you don't want to take Advil. I'm with you. I understand that. But you really have to pay attention to what's going on because you don't want to make the issue worse. All right. Okay. A few more questions here. Nick, is there any benefit to having cheat meals during a fat loss phase? I think cheat meals during a fat loss phase are more important mentally for some people. I really don't think they offer any benefits physically. I know some people say they help boost your metabolism. I don't believe in that. I mean, I used to follow that and believe that myself, but now after doing my last few shows with no cheat meals, I've realized that cheat meals never really helped me. For me, actually, they backfired in my face badly. They made me crave more sugar. They made me crave more simple carbs. They made me crave more trans fats. So I just eliminated them from my last like six bodybuilding shows. I never did them at all. And I felt so much better. And honestly, I looked better on stage. So cheat meals for me didn't work. However, I do work with people where I find that with a lot of people, the cheat meals help mentally for them. It gives them like something to look forward to. It gives them a sense of normalcy, especially if they're following a really strict diet. Even if they're not training for a bodybuilding show and they're just coming to work with me because they want to lose 30, 40 pounds, I do say to them, like, look, have that one cheat meal a week if it's going to help, if it's going to, like, say you and your husband or wife or your friends could go out for a meal, a few drinks, do it. Because it gives you a sense of normalcy. Because anyone will tell you that they're following a fairly strict diet. Even if it's a clean diet and it's a sustainable diet, it can still be fairly strict. So it's nice to have that little break where you can go out to a restaurant and order whatever you want. So I find it's more of a mental benefit for people than a physical one. But then again, I talked about this thing 2 weeks ago in the Q&A where some people, I don't recommend cheat meals at all because it throws them off completely. It sends them down this like downward spiral, right? And they get unhealthy relationships with food, and then they're constantly looking forward to that cheat meal, and they're just dreaming about food. And when the cheat meal day comes, they turn that meal into 2 meals or 3 meals or into an entire cheat day. So for some people, it doesn't work. So you have to understand your relationship with food before you say, "Oh, I can have a cheat meal, or maybe I can't." Or I can have two cheat meals a week. So again, it depends on your goals and your relationship with food. But I can tell you right now, as someone who doesn't really have cheat meals, my version of a cheat meal is if we go out to a restaurant and I'm like, huh, I'll have a tuna poke bowl. I mean, it's not the best thing, but it's not the worst thing. And that would be my cheat meal for the week. That's it. But it's pretty much food I already have around the house, tuna, rice, stuff I already eat. Maybe there'll be some mayo in there that I don't usually have. But other than that, it's pretty much my regular food. But I'm not going to go and have like a burger and fries because I don't eat burgers and fries. I'm going to have pizza. I don't eat pizza. So I'm not going to order that type of food. Right. Not because I feel like it's going to make me fat. It's just that I know for me, it's going to make me feel like garbage. So you have to understand how that food's going to make you feel. Okay. But the cheat meal, it's an individual thing. And every person I work with, I try to get an understanding of their current relationship with food before I recommend how many, if any, cheat meals they should have during the week. All right. But I can tell you across the board, majority of people I work with seem to do well with one cheat meal a week. Okay. And I usually do recommend that those people try, if they can, to put their cheat meal far away from their weigh-in. So if they're sending me a weigh-in Friday morning, I prefer for them to have their cheat meal on a Friday or Saturday night, which seems to work for most people because it's the weekend. They usually go out with friends or something, so it'll be easier. That's not a set rule though. That's just my recommendation, right? But you have to make that decision if a cheat meal is going to help you progress or if it's going to be detrimental to your results. And that's really an individual based scenario. And I base it on each person I work with. Okay. Okay. Last question here. Okay. Nick, should I be trained to failure on every set to build bigger muscles? No, I don't recommend training to failure on any sets. I never have been an advocate of training to failure. I think training to failure is the worst idea. I really don't see any benefit when people do forced reps. They have a spotter that I just don't. In the past, even when when I'm bench pressing, I rarely, if ever, have had to have my spotter grab the bar off me because I know what I'm capable of doing. I get a feel. My mind is in the muscle. So if I'm doing, let's say I'm doing an incline bench press and I'm doing, I don't know, 225 for 10 reps, I know by the time I'm getting to 8 or 9, if I'm going to be able to get that 10th rep because I'm in the muscle. It's not like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. It's like, no, I know what's going to happen. And some days I'm like, it's not going to happen. So I'll rack it at 8 or 9 reps and I'll do a drop set so I get those double digits. That comes with years of experience though, too. So if you are someone who's new to the gym and let's say you're trying to go for a PR, personal record, you have to be very careful as to what you're doing because for example, if you're doing something like an incline bench press again without a spotter, you could really risk injury if you don't know what you're capable of lifting, if you can do this weight or not. Okay. You could tear a pec. If you tear a pec, you're going to need surgery. If you need surgery, you're not going to train chest for at least 6 months. Sucks to be you, but that's going to stop all progress because that doesn't just impact your chest exercises. You're going to have a hell of a time doing shoulder presses. You're going to have a hard time doing bicep curls. It's all connected to pec major. Okay. So you don't want to train stupid. Okay. You want to approach your workouts methodically, intelligently. All right. You don't want to train with stupidity. So this is why I always tell people not to train to failure. Really, if you're training to failure, in my opinion, those last 1 or 2 reps that you're training to failure is basically momentum, joints, tendons, and ligaments. Very little muscle stimulation is going on. And if you go back to six-time Mr. Olympia Dorian Yates, who was a huge advocate of training to failure, I'm not going to knock him. Great physique, great bodybuilder, but he had to retire early because of the injuries. And there were a few Mr. Olympias that he won that were questionable, right? So, he won one of the, I think his last Olympia of a torn tricep. I mean, he should have won that. But you could see the tricep is hanging off the bone. Like that to me, yeah, his body looked great, but in bodybuilding, that's a flaw. So I wouldn't recommend that type of training. I'm not saying Dorian Yates didn't know what he was talking about. Obviously, the guy didn't know what he was talking about. He won 6 Mr. Olympias, but for the average person, I don't think they should train to failure. I don't train to failure. I want to, again, I'll quote Lee Haney here. I used it earlier, stimulate and not annihilate my joints, tendons, ligaments, and muscles. That's the goal. All right. And if you watch any of the great bodybuilders over the years, the Lee Haneys, Arnold Schwarzeneggers, Jay Cutlers, none of them trained to failure. They always had 1 or 2 reps left in the tank. If you watch the train footage, you can see they probably could have done 1 or 2 more reps, but they always stopped themselves short. Why? Because they took the muscle to failure, and that's the goal. It was to take the muscle to failure, not just go balls to wall and all this hardcore bullshit and see how much you can do and 1 rep max and all this crap. Because all the people that do that, hell, look at Ronnie Coleman. He's in a wheelchair. So, like, you have to think a little bit outside the box here and go, okay, well, how long do I want to last? And I mean, how long do you want to last in this game as in weight training? Do you want to have to retire at 45 and not be able to go to the gym because now you have a torn shoulder or you have a torn pec or you have a herniated disc? Probably not. So if you want to last in this game, you want to try your best to stay injury free. Now, obviously, sometimes injuries do happen. I've been injured before, but I've always been able to recover from my injuries fairly quickly because my injuries were never really done from doing anything stupid in the gym. Most of my injuries have happened outside the gym. So I don't recommend training to failure. I think that you can get enough stimulus, I should say, in the muscle belly from keeping those reps between 10 to 15 and making sure that you are feeling the muscle. If you are truly practicing proper form and technique, you're going to control both the eccentric contraction and the concentric contraction of the movement at all times. There should be no momentum. There should be no swinging around. All right. You should not need two spotters and all this nonsense. Not necessary. Okay. So again, if you want to last, if you don't want to, or if you want to lower your risk of injury, because I said injuries do happen, but if you want to significantly lower your risk of injury, I highly recommend that you do not train to failure. Okay. Because every scenario I know, every person I know that has trained to failure has had some type of injury that has either put them on the shelf for 6 months or has put them on the shelf for good, and they're not training at all anymore because they're so injury riddled. All right, so I don't recommend it. It's not necessary. Remember, stimulate, not annihilate. Lee Haney's quote, not mine. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, June the 8th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, your workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my in-house personal training business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate all the support and all the feedback that I receive from each and every single one of you. Thank you all again, and I will see you later on this week with this week's Coaching Reality episode. Thank you all, and I'll see you all later on. Bye for now.